Good afternoon. My name is Jason Guerrero. I'm a strength and conditioning specialist, and today we're going to go ahead and talk about strength conditioning for high school girls soccer. One of the quotes that I've heard over the years through training: train like you're supposed to, not as hard as you can. What this really does entail, encapsulates everything that, as a strength and conditioning coach, what we're trying to do is obviously reduce the imbalances, improve performance, but keeping the athlete on the field as long as possible to be stronger, faster, and more able to perform overall. So a lot of times we get caught, the harder you train, the better, which is true in some sorts, but there is such thing as overtraining where could leave an athlete injured. So we want to make sure that the athlete are able to maintain their longevity in the sport, as well as to be able to maintain their maintain through the season. So it's a big component. So I'm going to talk about the needs analysis for soccer. It is a high intensity, intermittent contact and team sport. Goal is to help female athlete soccer players to establish necessary physiological adaptations to improve performance and reduce injury while maintaining skills necessary for competition. Game length is typically 70 to 90 minutes. Requires high level of aerobic and anaerobic conditioning, speed, agility, strength, and power. How we're going to go ahead and do that is high through interval training, small-sided games to maintain touch, repeated sprint bouts, agility sessions, resistance, power, and speed training protocols. So the fiber type associated with soccer players is usually type 2, type 1. Sport actions are easy: running, sprinting, kicking, jumping, lateral shuffling, heading, diving for goalies, and throw-ins. So here's a breakdown of soccer energy analysis. So this is per activity, so it's not the whole gamut of what needs to go on for a player. So as we can see, highly dominant phosphocreatine system, especially short bouts of duration between 6 to 10 seconds, 3 seconds. Sprinting, jumping, diving, kicking, shooting, throwing. So again, those are just the movements within actions, the movement actions within the sport. And then intermittent times of aerobic glycolysis, when a player just is standing around and walking and regaining their breath. So we'll talk about that after. So we could see the movement with breakdown of systems by activity. So you can see the amount of time spent in the anaerobic glycolytic stage as well as the phosphocreatine. So it's predominantly there amongst the activities associated with the sport. So the anaerobic adaptations that we're hoping to achieve, neuromuscular through the central peripheral. So we're looking for heart and muscle structure and connective tissue. We're going to get better motor unit recruitment, muscle co-activation, force production, and decrease autogenic inhibitors, so athletes be able to perform in a different kind of capacity than they were before. Improve coordination. So as we go over here to the structural side, we're going to get a hypertrophic effect from actin myosin synthesis, fiber types that are predominant within the sport. We're going to get transitions from type 2X fibers to type 2A, and then stronger bones, obviously, through the microdamage, through the reduced stress to the body. So again, that's dependent on intensity of the workload. And then again, another important part is the connective tissue, tendons, fascia, cartilage, and ligaments of surrounding joints and those stabilizing structures. Cardiorespiratory, increased red blood cell and plasma volume, stroke volume, metabolic efficiency, improved resting heart rate. Endocrine, acute versus chronic. The biggest one, when we get the chronic, hopefully the potential growth hormone increase provides the athlete with more ability to exert force. Now here's the biggest component of soccer is the aerobic adaptations. So training soccer, you got to be able to last the whole 70 to 90 minutes. So you can see how it's highly aerobic, but you can see the activities that are the sport does depend upon. But if you train only in a glycolytic state, you're going to have a player that's going to have high bouts, really fat, really hard bouts of work, but able to last a short amount of time. So you might get 10 to 15 minutes out of that type of player versus one that has an aerobic, a sound aerobic base that's going to be able to recover from those. So as you can see here, all below adaptations stimulate heart efficiency, which is huge, and the rate of recovery, which is again huge. We want that athlete to be able to go those powerful bouts, you know, do their intermittent walking, do the intermittent jogging, and to be able to recover, to be able to last that entire game. So some of the critical adaptations are obviously the cardiac output. So the heart becomes more efficient. So what that just basically means that the heart is able to refract more blood with less beats, so we can get it throughout the body, oxygenate muscles. So the stroke volume improves, decreasing the heart rate. So resting heart rate starts to drop, and then decrease of lactate production. So if you have that anaerobic player that is able to go high, you know, and that's all they're able to do, then they're going to go into into a lactate coma, basically, where their body's not going to be able to it's just going to burst. So they're not going to be able to handle the workload. So with that aerobic adaptation, lactate clearance does improve. So you get that person that recovers. So improved VO2, maximal oxygen uptake. So you're improving their capacity, respiratory capacity. And then something that's completely different from anaerobic training is increased mitochondrial and capillary density, improve oxidative enzymes. So the whole oxygenation of the body just improves completely. And then you're going to have these, this is where you want to have the balance and figure out if this player is more anaerobic, then you need to build this foundation. If this player is more aerobic and less anaerobic, you need to help kind of build that component within them. So that's why everything has to kind of blend together. So here's a player needs analysis for soccer: increased aerobic capacity, endurance, improved biomechanical insufficiencies through proprioception, flexibility, and strength. So we want to reduce those imbalances of the body to reduce injuries, and improve performance. Increased anaerobic power is what we talked about. Increased agility skills related to soccer, and to make the player overall more bulletproof, so they can play longer. Needs analysis, especially for my sport. I'm starting off with beginners, so it's just basically they're newbies and they don't know movement and they need to understand it. Technique, form, execution, so that's where we're going on. Medical history is crucial to understand any current or lingering injuries. So everybody's different, so they can handle different situations. So you have to be really aware. Nutrition is a huge one, which we'll go over. Physiological and anatomical variances: Q angle, ligament laxicity due to hormones, lack of ACL size. This is really prevalent within women. Hip width, Trendelenburg rate, valgus and varus stresses on the knees. We want to pay attention to. Common sites of injury are tibiofemoral joint, talocrural joint, lower shank, and head trauma. Common injuries to these sites are ACL sprains, ankle inversion-eversion sprains, patellofemoral pain, known as runner's knee, tibiofemoral stress syndrome, and concussions. And then general known muscular imbalances of soccer players are tight hip flexors, weak posterior chain, hamstrings and glutes. Minimal upper body strength. Soccer players are extremely weak throughout their entire body, especially upper body. Tight lumbar and weak abdominals. So we're going to go into the nutrition phase of this now. It's a very key component. So we want to make sure that athletes understand what proteins, carbs, and fats, what it does for their body, that they need to eat. You're going to come across a lot of female athletes, unfortunately, don't eat, and they don't eat enough, and they feel that less is more for them. So we want to address the female athlete triad, eating disorders if there's anything there, amenorrhea, osteoporosis. We want to make sure they understand the proteins, carbs, and fats and the different ratios, making sure microbes are there as well, vitamins and minerals, especially with women, iron and calcium. Hydration pre, during, and post workout. For females around 19 or males around 19, about 13 cups of water is recommended per day, and more is recommended if it's a high endurance sport where they're sweating a lot. So the biggest thing I use is a P test, and P test you can tell if it's a simple test that the players can use, and if their urine's darker in color, they have a lot of work to do on the water intake, hydration, and if it's clear, they're going in the right direction, so maintain that. So sport-specific movement analysis. Whoops. Touchscreen. Okay, so going over that, just basic throw-ins, kicking, jumping, running, sprinting. At that, what joint is that motion occurring? So we've got the glenohumeral, radial ulnar, hip, patellofemoral, talocrural joints, major movements, major actions at those joints, and the muscles involved. Injuries real quick. Like I said, ACL sprains at the knee joint, tibiofemoral joint, due to non-contact or contact injuries. So as we can see here, non-contact cutting, jumping, deceleration. Contact injuries, body contact is made by opposing players, causing knee to bend or rotate excessively. Variances, like we said, higher quad to hamstring ratios, ligament laxicity, ACL size, minimal neuromuscular firing, and then landing kinematics. Interventions as a coach, we may need to address those and understand those and let players know of these so they can start visualizing, what needs to go on for themselves. But we need to get proper techniques for proper cueing, technique, and then focus points for each athlete. We could do some neuromuscular retraining through joint mobility and flexibility if necessary. Improve strength and stability. We can use protocols such as proprioception and balance training to reduce the asymmetry of the legs. So that's disparity between your stronger and your dominant and your non-dominant sides. Strengthen glutes and hamstrings of the posterior chain. We want to improve the pelvic girdle stability of that, and as well as reduce the valgus stress around the knees, valgus varus stress. Reduce hamstring quad ratios, connective tissues, you want them to strengthen as well. Some sample exercises, plyometrics, hip bridges, Romanian deadlifts, things of that kind of nature to work on that posterior chain. So here's a little chart of the occurrences amongst 100,000 athletes. Amongst girls soccer, it's extremely high. Girls basketball is extremely high. So especially in those kind of contact cutting, where abrupt deceleration needs to occur, those are the higher issues that we do see in exposure to injury. And here you can see the mechanism of injury. Ankle, at the ankle joint, so the talocrural joint, so sprains occur due to uneven surfaces, missteps, tackles. Especially soccer, we go from a turf field to a grass field, so the girls are not used to playing on a solid surface rather than uneven surfaces, so there are a lot of issues that do come up. So we have those two types of sprains, inversion, eversion, where the ankle will roll laterally, or eversion sprains where it rolls medially. And so inversion sprains are more to the anterior talofibular ligament, ATFL, which is the weakest lateral ligament, and it's a common type of injury. And then for the eversion, it's more towards the deltoid ligament in the ankle. So intervention, we can maintain mobility or increase dorsiflexion and plantar flexion to the gastroaxillary peroneal tendons or other compensatory tissue sites such as IT band to make sure that the proper hip function, everything's moving, piriformis and things like that nature, quads. We can do neuromuscular control and proprioceptive training. You utilize TheraBands. So here's side of the inversion sprain, eversion, and then sample type of utilizing some proprioceptive mean balance training. Helps mobility of the ankle, stability of the hip, engages the core, does a lot of good things for the athlete. Concussions are another major point. Amongst female athletes, about almost 2.5 times greater the occurrences. Females, concussions happen in females rather than males. Happens to head-to-head collisions, and you can see here just force from the other player transmitted through the, to the injured player's head. That come from, you see here, shoulder, that come from elbow, that can come from a flailing arm, or that come from a leg. But there are low incidences from heading the ball, which is a good thing. Prevention and intervention, kinesthetic awareness. So through a strength coach, through training, we can help them become more aware of their surroundings. Strengthen musculature related to deceleration. So especially utilizing depth jumps or squatting, help them really work on that eccentric phase, so they work on the posterior chain. Increase trunk and neck strength. So like I said earlier, very weak up on top, that from that waist up. So we want to help them build that strength so they can go ahead and have that reactionary component to them, so they can slow down. And then you'll potentially see headgear such as exo shields, which are worn by some players. So you reduce times of injury. Okay, now we're going to get into the Paradise High School strength and conditioning program that I've set up. I followed this gentleman by the name of David Tenney, sports science, very progressive. He's a sports science and performance manager for Seattle Sounders of the MLS, and he's very progressive in his thoughts and what he's players, injury management, injury prediction even. But his assessment of soccer players, which is completely true today, soccer players today are overplayed and undertrained. So with that said, there's less time spent in the weight room where there should be. Working on flexibility, strengthening the imbalances. Soccer players are one of the weakest athletes, so those things need to be addressed. And everything's so isolated. You have the strength coach over here, you have the fitness director over here, and then you have the coach, the field coach over here. So all of these three need to come together and to formulate, a sound regimen for the player, so the player is able to last the entire season without injury. So I really like this quote. So we're going to go on a test selection. Just nice and easy. We're going to go in order: anthropometry, flexibility, vert jump. We're going to do power, the vert jump for power, agility, T-test. And then we're going to go for strength, 1 RM leg press, speed, 30-meter sprint. Why we're utilizing 30-meter sprint? The average, sprint distance for a soccer player is about 32 yards, so it's equivalent to 30 meters. Local muscle endurance, push-up test, and the aerobic capacity by the yo-yo intermittent 1 test. We're going to do a 2-day split just because of the weight room availability. We have 6 or 7 different kind of teams in there, so small facilities are limited. Number of players, we have about 65 players usually, and for recovery purposes. So we're going to go on a 2-day split, 1 day weight room, 1 day training. So just a little background of this. Anthropometry, we want to focus on body fat. We want to focus on body composition, circumference measurements, resting heart rate. I like to throw in the overhead squat test because you can really find out immediately what's going on with the player. And they can immediately feel and see what their deficiencies are, and we can go ahead and address those and help them work on those. We're going to start with the warm-up. Foam rolling, light run, a light jog, and dynamic warm-up. Go into the flexibility test so we can see, this is a big one, so athletes can see, if they have tight hamstrings, you can see, address if there's any kind of any kind of anterior kind of pelvic tilt within the athlete, and you can go ahead and let them know that they need to go ahead and work on stretching, their hip flexors, and then strengthening their the posterior chain as well as core muscles. Vert jump, really good for power. It simulates the power clean, especially with high school. You don't have the time to work with those big movements, so it works safely with those big movements in the amount of time to teach. This is really good at mimicking movement that we can work on that triple extension later. Single leg press is a good. You can find out where the athlete is psychologically, so you can give the RPE, the rate of perceived exertion, and let them tell you what the load they want to go ahead and lift with. And it's a great testing tool, and it's something they can learn. They can utilize, outside of the realm of sport. They can utilize it on their own when they do join gyms or things like that. So they're familiar. Push-up test. We're gonna go, standard army push-up, or they can go from their knees, and then we're gonna go ahead and cool down with foam roll and static stretch. So Thursday testing is gonna be on the field. Standard warm-up, foam rolling, leg jog, dynamic warm-up, agility test. I like the T-test because you'll see the footwork of the person, of the player. So whether they're moving laterally in each direction, you can see those specific areas you need to address as a strength and conditioning coach, or even as a coach. And the reasons are we're changing direction at least every 2 to 4 seconds as soccer players, which is equivalent to 1,200 to 1,400 times a match. Linear speed, we talked about that. 96% of sprints within soccer are 30 minutes or less, so this is a good testing tool. And the yo-yo intermittent test for aerobic capacity, which is a crucial one that we want to see where we need to develop amongst those players. So getting into the macro cycle, so this is just a brief little breakdown of what it is. So postseason soccer season lasts about 16 weeks. And that's stemming from November to February, mid-February, depending on if you become CIF tournament eligible. Right now, the girls are going through a 3-week A&R rest, so they're doing what they want to do, having fun, relaxing, getting their body back into the healing process right now. We start back up next week, so outside activities are stressed. Some players are obviously they're in different seasons now. They're with their track team. They're in the spring sports, track team, and softball. So here's a breakdown of the macro cycle, 4 to 4 weeks. 24 weeks is March through August would be basic movements. Again, we're teaching fundamentals, technique, form, breathing, execution of the exercise. So just basic movements. Then we're going to move on to the prep phase, hypertrophy, endurance. Basic strength, microcycle 2, we're going to introduce more weight, dumbbells, barbells, things of that nature, and, change the dynamics of the workouts, single-legged exercises. And then we're going to go back into hypertrophy and endurance. We have a longer period, so we can go ahead and do this to re-implement what they've learned before. So they, ingrain it into them with the movements, technique, form, execution, all that good stuff. Then we're going to go back into that basic strength again to really, to get that foundation of strength, that what we're lacking. The mesocycle 2, we're going to go for 12 weeks, and then we're going to go 3 weeks of hypertrophy endurance again, 4 weeks of basic strength, and then we're going right into, right before preseason, we're going to go into strength and power. So that's different kind of movements, high intensity aerobic, plyometrics, maintain flexibility, agility work. Then preseason will start, and then we go through microcycle 1. That's about 8. So the mesocycle is going to last about 8 weeks. We're going to do strength and power, increase volumes and loads. Intensity of aerobic activity on the field is going to completely change, and it's going to increase. Intensity of increased plyometrics, so we're starting to peak right now, or almost on that peaking process, making it halfway up that hill. Now macrocycle 2 during October, November, 3 weeks, strength and power, we're going to slightly increase those intensities. In aerobic work right before, we have an unloading week as well as an active rest week, which is a dead week before we start season. And in season, it's going to be notable where strength and power is going to be reduced. They're going to lose some of it, so we want to make sure that we have a maintenance phase, 1 to 2 days a week, that we go ahead and work on that to maintain some of it. Emphasize multi-joint movements, but we're going to reduce the intensity and the frequency. Going over, here's just a preparatory phase, and here's just a sample workout protocol. just very basic agility, and then throwing in some basic movements so they become fundamentally sound through squats, lunges, rows so they get really optimal retraction and contraction, and they feel it in those areas, as well as core exercises. And then the basic phase, 70% of 1 RM, some comfortable weight for them with moderate rest between 60 seconds to a minute and a half. So we can see here, it's more of a linear workout. So, again, we just want to instill confidence into them, and them to be comfortable with the movements and the load that they're using. The basic strength and power phase, very easy. It's more of an undulating. By this time, hopefully they're a little bit stronger and more sound and more aware. So we go from 80% day on Monday to a 40 to 50% on Wednesday to a Friday that's going to be back to higher intensity of 80%. In season, we want to make sure that we maintain what we have, some of what we have gained. So, we're going to do more of a superset to kind of keep the heart rate up, to get more of an aerobic kind of, output from it. With more kind of different kind of exercises that they're going to be able to be fundamentally sound with. So here's our in-season competition. So hopefully that's us, bigger, stronger, more confident. And then we're going to go ahead and modify it. Obviously reducing the volume, reducing the intensity of the workouts and the loads, to hopefully, obviously the 1 to 2 days a week to maintain what we have gained and earned. Some soccer considerations, especially with the World Cup coming up, men's and women's, the women's coming up and the men's just finishing. A lot of people are going to be more interested in the game, so especially 5 to 12-year-olds, getting them in a good movement protocol, strength training with minimal loads is really advantageous. So we want to make sure there's no heavy loading, but they're going to get improved coordination and muscle firing, so more of a neuromuscular, as we said, through high school and female athletes, male athletes. You want to kind of take the same kind of considerations and progress them along at a good rate that they can handle. And then we have collegiate athletes that are in a different kind of tier, doing different dynamic performance enhancement movements. And then we have our rec league players that are 18 to 40 that are just doing it for health. So they need to implement some kind of strength training regimen at least 2 days a week, 5 days a week, to maintain, reduce cardiovascular disease or any kind of metabolic disease that, they might be predisposed to, keep weight down, keep everything functioning. And especially if they're playing, you want to make sure that they're strong enough to handle the duration of the game. So with that said, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you learned something.